Hey y'all, Taylor Gordon here with Diamond 2 Horsemanship, and welcome to the three-part series where we break down how to help your horse become softer, more responsive to your hands. We're going to go through the three steps. The first one is how to use your hands differently. Today we're going to jump into that and cover the hows, whys, whats, and whens of how to use your hands differently in order to help your horse become more responsive. And the two other steps we're going to cover in two different videos. We'll just do 3 different videos to cover each one of those steps, all working towards the same goal. So we have how to get your horse to become more responsive by changing what you do with your hands, and then we have use your legs in order to help your horse become more responsive, and then we have use a different tool. So we're gonna jump into how to use your hands differently. I'll be working with this horse, and I'll just have a regular snaffle bit, traditional style snaffle bit, just a jointed mouthpiece, nice copper inlays, and the ring snaffle. I typically always start this process in just a basic two-handed riding tool like this. We'll talk about tools later. This is typically where I start. It's typically where I identify the problems and where I begin to address those problems. And then we'll use the other steps as necessary. So I'm going to show you today how I prefer to use this tool in the most effective way to either prevent my horse from becoming dull to my hands or desensitized to my hands, or how I would help sharpen that up and go in the reverse and help a horse become responsive to my hands that is dull or is desensitized to my hands. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll meet you in the arena and we'll get started. Okay, let's jump into our video today and our topic of how to use our hands differently in order to help our horse either prevent them from getting desensitized to our hands, or to help resensitize them to our hands. We're not going to touch on our tools or our legs because that's going to be the next 2 steps. So I am going to do all of these things somewhat simultaneously while I'm training, but let's just keep it very individual for now so we can work through each one of these steps thoroughly. The first thing is that I see typically a big mistake that we as riders make too much that desensitizes our horses to our hands is just simply riding with too much contact too often. And that's usually not something that we can pinpoint and say, yes, I do that. It's something we usually do mindlessly, accidentally applying just 1 or 2 pounds of pressure to the reins constantly because of our need to feel secure on our horse. And that can be the quickest way and the easiest way to desensitize our horses to the pressure applied to their face in any riding tool. And that is something that we want to work on avoiding. So the first step is being conscious of that. So you really have to purpose when you ride to be conscious of what your hands are doing. And if those reins are straight, and they're probably making contact, okay? Avoid looking down and seeing a straight line from your hand to your bit, okay? The second thing we're going to talk about is how to apply pressure when you have purposed to apply pressure to those reins and communicate with your horse. And that's something I'm going to use him and I will demonstrate, okay? Typically I find horses that are non-responsive in the face, or not maybe non-responsive, but slower and more desensitized to your hands. They don't back up well. And this guy's starting to learn to back up better. And I used him today just because he is the definition of a horse that's strong in the face. And that is almost 100% due to just simply the way he's built and bred. He's a quarter horse that's part draft. He's big and strong, and he's 11 years old, and he's had quite a bit of riding. So he's learned how to just kind of use his weight and his strength and his size, not to be a bad horse, but just a little bit resistant. And that shows up in a bigger way in his body. And we are talking directly about the face. The face is a reflection of where your horse is at as far as softness throughout its whole body. So yes, I'm going to target the face in these 3 steps. But when I say my horse is desensitized to my hands, and you're going to see as the steps progress why that, it has to do with the whole horse's body. Okay, I am not the trainer that's telling you how to soften your horse's face so the rest of its body is going to be soft. And you'll see that in the next step when we talk about our legs and how that applies to our horses being soft in the face. So this, I would say, is pretty nice. Like, he's pretty nice and soft here. He's really willing to come off of my hands and not hang on my hands. And he's got patience to my hands. So there's different levels of softness. There's the softness where my horse will give, and then they've got to take that back away from me right away. And that part of that is just a horse learning to mature to where I can pick them up and they'll hold that shape that I ask them to hold and remain soft for a duration of time rather than just that moment and then they have to have their head right back or their body right back. So let's talk about if our horse is resistant, and this horse was. He was real leany, and even like right now, he's kind of leaning onto the bit. When we're talking about unnecessary contact with our horses, when I stop and stand my horses still, I see a lot of people like this. They've got some contact on the reins, and they have the opportunity given to their horse for them to lean into that bit and root into that bit a little bit. I want to give my horse as much rein as he needs, and then if he's eating grass or putting his head all the way on the ground and doing things that aren't just standing still, then I can correct that. Just like I would if I'm riding him and he does something I don't really want him to do. I'm not holding on to him, preventing him from it. I'm going to correct the issue when it comes up and then leave him alone again. Same thing when I stand my horse still. So if he moves, he wants to back up, if he wants to do this, I might just pick up on the reins and say, you know what, that's not really preferable right now. Let's not do that. So let's go ahead and get into how I used my hands to help this horse become responsive, as he was not as responsive to my hands in the beginning, just simply by using my hands differently. I think a lot of us know how to just pull on our horses. Now there are 3 different types of pressure I will use. There's steady pressure, which is this, just pulling straight back, waiting till my horse responds, and I give. Then there would be rhythmic pressure. So I'm going to just, and you're not going to see this very well, I'm just going to rock the bit back and forth in my horse's mouth. So if I'm moving my horse forward and I want my horse to soften its face while I'm moving forward, then I will tend to, instead of using steady pressure, which horses tend to lean on, I will tend to change that pressure to rhythmic pressure, where I just take the fingers of my hands and I slide that bit back and forth in my horse's mouth with my hands, okay? That would be changing it to rhythmic pressure, which is number 2 ways to use your hands differently or use that pressure differently to help get the response that you need to get from your horse. Then there would be a sudden pressure, okay? Say just what I was doing here when he's kind of rooting at the ground and stretching his nose into the bit, and he already has made the mistake of leaning on my hands or trying to hunt my hands out and lean on them. I will use that sudden pressure just like that, okay? How I can apply that and how I do apply it at times while I'm riding, I'm going to show you that next. Let's talk let's pause really quick before I go show you that. I don't ever want this to become a pressure that's used in a way that teaches my horse to be unconfident in my hands. If I overuse this sudden pressure, or I overuse steady pressure, or I overuse rhythmic pressure, I can teach my horse to become unconfident in my hands. And especially with the pressure, like the sudden pressure, I can teach them to be reactive to my hands. And I don't want reactive. I want responsive. I don't want reactive. So I don't want, when I take a hold of my horse, I don't want him to go like that, okay? If I use sudden pressure out of line and too often, that will happen, okay? Now, that being said, it is a tool that I do use on almost every horse, and it depends. Like, I'm going to use it more on a horse like this, that's just kind of happy-go-lucky about my hands and doesn't want to be responsive. And I'll show you that. So let's walk out here. And let's say, for instance, I'm asking him to make a circle. My hands are making contact, and he just wants to lean and hunt that bit while I'm making contact, telling him I need him to circle. And I just feel like he's trying to make me pull him into that turn. I might just say, go from that steady pressure to like, hey, come here right now. And then I go right back to leaving my hand there. I don't give a complete release. I'm just saying, hey, don't pull on my hand. So like, just like I did right there. And I may not have shown you that. I'm trying not to do it unnecessarily to him. Okay. So I've got him here in a bend. Okay, and he kind of turned his head that time. It kind of went like that, like let me pull on your hand. And if I get, that's not an excuse to go pull on his face, really, because he came right back and found the right answer. But say he's leaning and he's persisting to carry his head out there and root into my hand, and I'm asking him to shape to the inside of this circle here, I might just give that rein a little tug, okay? And I want it to be done in a way where it's almost an accident, okay? Or while he's backing up right here like this. Like, he likes to lean a little bit when I ask him to back up. And I might just say, here, give me that corner of your mouth. Not going to do it with two hands, okay? You see how I asked him to kind of turn? I asked him to back, but I asked with the left rein. And when he was pulling away from that left rein, I kind of tugged on it just a little bit. Again, this is something you need to use the other steps first. Turn your horse loose, okay? Use steady pressure well. Be very quick to release. And that's something I skipped in the beginning. If you want your horse to be responsive, number one, you can't hold on to him all the time and prevent all the problems by just holding on to your horse. And number two, you have to be on time with your release of pressure when your horse does the right thing. You have to have those two steps in place before you can start using these other techniques of using your hands differently in order to help your horse become softer, okay? Do those first two steps until you know you're good at it and you feel like you've taken your horse as far as you can with those steps. Then you're like, you know what? I'm just not getting any softness and the feel that I need. Then you can start trying to play with sliding that bit back and forth in your horse's mouth. Then if that's not getting the response that you need and your horse still wants to lean on that pressure because it's not enough incentive for him not to lean on it, give him a little bit more incentive by taking a hold of a corner of his mouth once in a while. Okay, but again, if I ever feel like my horse is getting scared or unconfident with my hands and the way I use my hands, I go back. I need to go back. And I don't ever want to use that sudden pressure or that rhythmic pressure, any of that enough to where I get my horses being reactive to my hands, okay? Hopefully that all makes sense. I don't feel like I have a lot more to add on this topic in particular today. I could show you a lot more of just me riding, and you're going to see a lot of that in a lot of other videos anyways. I think first of all, the most important thing is that you understand the principles, you have the steps, and then you understand the order to use them in. And I strategically made the order of the 3 main steps of this video series to be first priority first, then second priority second, third priority third, okay? So that you don't get mixed up. I think it's very important to use your basic tool of a snaffle bit in two hands with your horse. If you feel like you need to work on this, or your horse is not as responsive as you would like them to be, you start here. You start by making sure you use your hands well, then you help your horse respond to your hands well, okay? First off, you've got to do you first, fix you first, then you can begin to change the way your horse responds. Put your horse at a basic snaffle bit. You can do this in a halter. You can do this in a riding, like a rope halter or a side pull or a boselle. Anything two-handed. I prefer a snaffle. I would prefer to recommend you do these exercises in a snaffle bit. Learn how to use your hands well. Then use these steps as the beginning to teaching your horse how to respond well to your hands, okay? The rhythmic pressure, I guess I didn't talk a lot about that. Instead of using a sudden pressure every now and then backing my horse or while I'm moving on a circle, the sudden pressure is more of an extreme situation correction for me. I tend to revert to the rhythmic pressure. If they're not giving to a steady pressure, like if I pick my hands up and just hold them, and they're not really giving to that, and they just really want to lean and root in my hands, then I'll just change it to that rhythmic pressure. And this is not like I'm trying to grind that bit back and forth on the mouth of my horse. That's not what this is. This is a nice, I'm just changing the pressure, just side to side. Not trying to bump that ring into each side of the horse's mouth. I'm just sliding that mouthpiece across its tongue. So it's kind of an annoyance compared to me just pulling straight back and that pressure just pulling straight back. It's now all of a sudden it's sliding on my tongue, and that's a little bit more annoying, and I pay attention to it more, and now I am tempted to respond a little bit better. That's me speaking for the horse. That's the idea with the rhythmic pressure. That's kind of my go-to if my horse is leaning on me. The other thing I use the sudden pressure for, and maybe it's not an extreme case, but maybe your horse is very loud with its face. I have an Arab right now, and you'll probably see that horse in another video. It just gets annoyingly loud with its face at times, where it's like, hey, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing for job, and I'm going to throw my head upside down and side to side, and I'll just give a little knock on that side of it, or the corner of that horse's mouth every now and then with that sudden pressure idea, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, and it stops doing all that goofiness. And again, I made it like it was an accident. I made it almost like he kind of bunked himself upside the lip with the bit because he was flinging his head around, okay? Just like when this horse is kind of putting his head down on the ground, and if he's gonna, eventually do that and go eat and walk off while I'm trying to stand, I just kind of accidentally let him run into that bit. And that can help some of that just not bad or strong-headed behavior, but just kind of annoying, out-of-line behavior, okay? I think that pretty well wraps up this portion of our first step in the progression of how to help my horse become more responsive to my hands and how to prevent my horse from getting heavy in the face and heavy through their body in relationship to my hands and feet. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you're looking forward to the next video, and I hope this one helped you out a ton. And we'll jump into the next video as soon as I can.